Okay, you're on.
Okay, hello everybody here in the show JCC and also everybody out there in video land. My name is Marty Belsky, and for the last 3 years I've had the honor to chair the Akron-Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. Thank you for coming for our seminar, Lest We Forget, Preserving the Record of the Holocaust. With the passage of time, there are fewer and fewer individuals who can provide first-person accounts of the horrors of the Holocaust. Our hope and our goal is to make sure, or at least try to make sure, that our community, current students in Akron and Summit County, Ohio, and ultimately future generations never forget the horrors and lessons of the Holocaust. Education allows individuals and society to recognize the warning signs of hate and discrimination and actively work against those kinds of biases so we have a chance to prevent similar atrocities in the future. Giving students some insights and knowledge of the horrors of the Holocaust and the continuing reality of genocides might force them to realize the consequences of not only hate and discrimination, but also societal indifference in face of prejudice. Giving them this knowledge, and we hope commitment through active participation in our projects, which you'll hear more about a little bit later, can provide them with the tools to educate their peers and become custodians and stewards of this information. Again, to that end, our theme is lest we forget these atrocities, and unless we do, history is likely to repeat itself. So, there's a number of people I want to introduce, if I can. First, Laura, stand up. Laura is our executive director in charge of the program. Brian Fox, stand up. You're going to be hearing from later. Brian is now assumed a leadership role in the Jewish community. He'll be working closely with the council in future months. Following our main speaker, Mr. Merman, which you'll hear a little bit more about in a few minutes. Brian will moderate the discussion with second-generation Holocaust survivors. Board member Renee Pinsky. Renee, please stand so everybody can see you. We'll tell us later about this year's 35th annual Akron-Summit Holocaust Arts and Writing Contest for Akron and Summit County students in the 6th to 12th grade. Now, I'd like to introduce Holocaust expert, but I want to tell a little bit about it, which I didn't know all this myself. For over 40 years, she has been involved in Jewish education, which included Holocaust education. She was born in Brooklyn, raised in New Jersey, came here about 52 years ago, has been someone who spearheaded this program with seminars and the Writing and Arts Contest for many, many years. And she has been someone who has forced us to think through things, forced us to respond, and also forced us to never forget. So Esther, come up and make your introductions for our speaker, please.
Should I tell them what I know about you, or should I read?
You're going to say whatever you're going to say.
I have to tell you, everybody, as we're standing in this
Put the
room,
mic down.
as we're sitting in this room, it is amazing to see you all. It's been, I'm sure, for everyone, just as it is for me. You're welcome to join us, Rabbi, whatever. It is delightful. We have teachers, we have members of the community, we have clergy, we have members of government, and I think we're all here to talk about something not just that's historical, but that unfortunately, to some extent, is happening now. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Tim Murnan. Tim is an associate professor of education at Bowling Green State University, and he, like many professors, has many hats: teaching literacy, language arts, curriculum design, and he prepares middle and secondary school teachers, including some younger in those areas. But the part that's most interesting to me is many years ago, it's many years ago for all of us now, right? Many years ago, as a professor there was a small group of Jews that were survivors in Toledo, about 6. And he got a Fulbright Hayes group study grant, and they went on a pilgrimage to go to all the countries that they came from. and he was privileged to lead that. So we are privileged to inherit his enthusiasm. And I always like to include that, because how do you get interested in new things? It's a very unusual way to get interested. He continues to present on strategies for teaching about the Holocaust and genocide, and particularly Holocaust study to local communities. He is also head of the used to be called the Ohio Council on Holocaust and Genocide Studies, which is now HGen, Holocaust Genocide Education Network, and it's right up on top. And a few of us in this room have had the privilege to be on that council and are joining that council. And it's a conversation. Why are we still looking at the Holocaust? I can't resist. I taught this for 2 years. And I used to run these seminars when we had a teacher center here in this building, which we no longer have. But you are all the answers. So we all thank you very, very much. His production for tonight will be Lest We Forget, Preserving the Record of the Holocaust, to help us, guide us, for those of us that are teachers or might have kids that are going to be preparing to come and join us. Tim.
Hi, and thanks for having me tonight. I want to just get started with a couple of things. If you're tech savvy or if you're not, that strange looking device in the top right hand corner is a QR code. If you put your phone in any kind of camera mode and point it at that thing, it's kind of creepy, but your phone will recognize it. It's supposed to recognize it. And take you to my PowerPoint. So if you want my PowerPoint later on, and I can come back to this slide, but if you want the PowerPoint later on, you can follow me on your device. All right.
And for those of you that are completely illiterate, I can actually get a copy and attach it to a regular.
Esther will print paper copies, but the thing that what you won't get is the clickable kinds of things on some of the slides, because I'll take you to some video and some resources from various Holocaust organizations and some things like that. So it's pretty clickable. That young lady in the back, she's probably the most tech savvy, right, sitting right there. Your daughter, she probably knows how to do all this stuff. Okay, so I'll turn that off so I don't waste my battery. I struggled with the title of this. Lest We Forget was locked in stone. I didn't have any problem with that, but I think Marty wanted preserving the record, and I felt like that. Yes, that captured some of it, but so much of the records of the Holocaust were the records kept by the perpetrators. That I thought, yes, we want to preserve the record of this, the event. But Esther sort of suggests, and I thought preserving the memory, blah, 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 blah. And Esther said, yes, memory, but you have to capture their experience. It's not just the memory, right? So I struggled with all this. So this is maybe is officially titled, Lest We Forget, Preserving the Record of the Memory of the Experiences of the Holocaust for the Next Generation. But I'd run out of space there to do all of that. As Esther said, I have been the president of the Ohio Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education up until about August, when we're going through a sort of a rebranding and refocus of what we're trying to do. So we're now calling ourselves the Holocaust and Genocide Education Network, HGen, and I'll talk more about that at the end, because there's some opportunities for you as teachers, those of you who are teachers, to maybe jump in and be more involved. We have a couple of upcoming events, one in November on Kristallnacht. It's a virtual Zoom and you can join it, or a summer conference in Dayton. And I know that's to the other side of the state, but there's good reason to go over there, and I'll tell you why. And if you really, I'm giving you the out right now. I know Temple Grandin is over at the library, and if you really, have the idea that you wanted to come see Temple Grandin talk about all of her amazing understanding of how people with special needs learn, you won't hurt my feelings if you walk out, because I would go over and sit at Temple Grandin's feet, so you can decide. You won't hurt my feelings. I'm going to start tonight with memory. Some stories and some experiences. I've been thinking a lot about Gerda Weissman. Some of you may, I'm told, have met Gerda Weissman years ago as she came here. I want to begin with Gerda Weissman. partly because Gerda just died in April. Her story, there's been things in the media sort of reminding people of Gerda and her story. And I thought it was a useful place to start. I also, when I come around to show you some of the material from the US HMM, one of the first documents they have for teachers who are trying to figure out where to begin is a one-day lesson. And we're going to sort of experiment with it right now. It's a little one-day lesson on Gerda Weissman and about 3-minute clip from her larger story. So let me introduce you. So here's the fun of technology, right? This is why I asked her, just printing it on paper doesn't cut it. You're ready for the 21st century? Okay. Actually,
I'm from number 2 century.
hold up here for a second. No, you're gonna, this is classroom participation. Put your finger on that blue line right there. Tap and go. There you go.
Magic.
The magic of technology. So this is a New York Times story. You have to have a New York Times, or sorry, Washington Post. You have to have an account to get the whole story. I'm pirating off my daughter's account, but she's pirating off my New York Times account. Why can't I get this thing to scroll?
Excuse me?
Let's make a margin to it first. It's very powdery.
So that's good. And I just want to read a little bit before I show you a video.
Would you like me to read for you?
No, you may sit down, give.
I'm gonna get you with him before we do that. No,
She will get even. It was May 7th, 1945. If you know, Gerda's birthday was May 8th, 1924. So she's about 21. She's literally 21 years. She turned 21 that day. It was May 7th, 1945, the day before the young Jewish woman's 21st birthday, and only hours after Germany had officially surrendered to the Allied forces. Her hair was matted. It had turned white. She's 21 years old. And she weighed 68 pounds. She wore a ragged dress and ski boots that her father told her she had to wear. And she was leaning against the wall of an abandoned factory just inside the Czech border. This is how 2 American soldiers found her when they drove up in their Jeep, having heard about a group of Holocaust survivors in a former factory, all young women who had survived and some who didn't survive a death march. One of the men asked her in German and English if she spoke either language. She was from Poland, but she knew German and responded to him. And that's as far as I'll go with that. But that's a recent article that was just printed in April in the Washington Post. Pardon? And that's the end of the book. You have to read the beginning of the book. And if you haven't read Gerda's All But My Life, it's a really, really powerful story. It's worth reading. There is, teachers, also a 39-minute HBO documentary that was created in 1995. It's actually an Academy Award-winning documentary, and we're going to watch a couple minutes of it, which you can also show in one class period or a couple class periods. So keep that in mind. And anything I spend time here talking about Gerda, I could stand here and talk about 10 or 12 or 100 other people, and you know that. And you all have somebody in your mind who you could tell their story and begin there with their story. But we'll begin tonight with Gerda. So now I have to go back and see if this will work. So it takes me, I got back out. Okay, so here's the video. So now I want to watch a short video clip of Gerda and her husband Kurt described that moment that we just read about. In the first hours after Gerda and her companions knew the war was over. As you watch and as you listen, consider what stands out as important to Gerda. At the same time, consider what stands out as important to you. And I'm going to give you a little writing assignment because I'm an English teacher. I prepare my teachers to teach students how to write. One of the first things that we do is think about prompts, giving students a simple prompt to write from. It might be a quote. It might be a text it could even be a child reading something out of a children's picture book and having students think about it. In this case, we're going to look at a short piece of film. And afterwards, I'm going to ask you to write for about 3 minutes. So if you have a pen and some sort of paper, great. If you have an electronic device, great. Marilyn, I know you have your fancy iPad. And if you just want to think about this and do some writing inside your head. So what is important to Gerda and what's important to you? And I think with the magic of technology. Right, enhance the product.
A very clear view of freedom and liberation came that morning when I stood in this doorway of the abandoned factory. And I saw the car coming down the hill. And the reality of that came when I saw the white star on its hood and not the swastika. There were two men in that car. One jumped out.
I saw some skeletal figures trying to get some water from a hand pump, but over on the other side, leaning next to the end, against the wall, next to the entrance of the building, I saw a girl standing, and I decided to go walk up to her.
And that was an aura of that awe, of the disbelief in daylight, to really see someone who fought for our freedom, for my ideals. And he looked like God.
And I asked her in German and in English whether she spoke either language. She answered me in German.
And I knew what I had to say. And I said to him, we are Jewish, you know. For a very long time, at least to me it seemed very long. He didn't answer me. And then his own voice betrayed his emotion. He was wearing dark glasses, I couldn't see his eyes. He said, so am I.
I asked about her companions.
He said, may I see the other ladies? The form of address we hadn't heard for 6 years. I told him that most of the girls were inside, they were too ill to walk. And he said to me, won't you come with me? I didn't know what he meant. So he held the door open for me and let me proceed. And that was the moment of restoration, of humanity, of humaneness, dignity, of freedom.
We went inside the factory. It was an indescribable scene. There were women scattered over the floor on scraps of straw. Some of them quite obviously with a mark of death on their faces.
I took him to see my friends.
The girl who was my guide made sort of a sweeping gesture over this scene of devastation and said the following words: noble be man, merciful and good. And I could hardly believe that she was able to summon a poem by the German poet Goethe, which is called The Divine at such a moment. And there was nothing that she could have said that would have underscored the grim irony of the situation better than what she did.
And his first American Liberation Day is now my husband. He opened not only the door for me, the door to my life and my future.
One of our congregants here went to school with Grove's kids in Boston.
Pretty
And
special.
she's the reason we got Grove to come to our.
So hold on to that, because when I get to some of these other principles, one of the things I want to think about is how we connect the stories of the Holocaust to our local communities and to the issues that are going on in our communities. And I want you to hold on to that, because I want to problematize that a little bit. So here's my task for you. I'm going to come back to this screen. And then I got to back up just one. I want you to write for 3 minutes. I want you to write whatever's in your head about Goethe's stuff. So if you need paper, I can provide you some. If you want to just organize your thoughts, that's fine too. But if you were my students, I would make you write. I'm going to write one. Can be bullet points. It doesn't have to be full sentences. Boys and girls. Anybody want any paper? You want a pencil?
He's just waiting to show that old.
Students always like a little puzzle. They like a little. So what are you thinking? Are you willing to talk a little bit about, maybe read from what you wrote or articulate a little bit about what's in your head after watching this and after thinking about this? Who wants to talk? What are you thinking?
What it spoken to me while watching that film that I forgot what it is, the word humanity, in other words, human. How the simple kind acts of being addressed as ladies and doors being opened, etc., which was showing total respect toward Gerda as a person, as a woman, not being vilified for her ancestry, and not being treated as a non-person or noun.
Can I get A+?
My work here is done. I'm not-
No, you're not. You take them to me when you stay.
I could really, I just started thinking about what she represents. As survival. Survive based upon faith and hope. Just seems to me that the strength that you have to endure to keep on, that came way down inside, you know. So to me, those are the things that just in my mind.
You have a hand up or you have a hand up?
I guess I can say, I mean, this is a kind of random stream of consciousness, but their story just proves that the truth is always more fascinating than fiction. It's a very simple story on one level. It feels like a boy meets girl, but it's not that. It's also a hero rescuing a lady, but it's also more than that. A story about fate, two people from different worlds who are, I feel, meant to be together. And his simple words, I am too, suddenly he wipes out years of pain and fear and neglect. And there we go.
Please.
I can't even get it a poem. Okay, the wall was cold, still. Start again. The wall was cold, still feel it now. Yet my heart was warm, desperate for the longing to be freed by a star similar to my own. Eyes that were shielded to hold back emotions, emotions of love and truth, emotions of innocence and empathy, emotions of the rebuilding of my life.
Don't really want to go after that.
Just sort of stream of consciousness here. I just wrote humanity versus dehumanization, decency lacking then and now, respect lacking then and now, courage 6 years, for honesty, we are Jews. And I wrote, how have we come back to a place where we Jews and minorities are once again targeted, and why hasn't the world learned?
I want every one of you. You are the most amazing people. And I have to tell you, you fill my heart. And our communities are happy, looking to happy as teachers, as citizens. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Incredible.
I think what was important to her was finding pieces of hope. And she found those in the small acts of restoring her dignity. And whereas what I saw was just devastation, or I felt, and she was finding those pieces of hope.
One more. And that's where this is great.
If I get for you, I have a backward generation, so much, you may have to leave it on your shoulder. Who are we when we find ourselves at the extremity of our being? The place where the road drops on. The air is sucked out of the well has no bottom. Who are we then?
All right, we can stay and spend some time talking about what Gerda is experiencing and what we're experiencing in this process, but we won't get to all of my other slides and a more fantastic discussion. So hold all of this in your head. One of the things I'm very conscious of is thinking about how I would teach some of this stuff with students in the classroom and how I would help them make connections to some of this material. One of our big concerns, I think, with the young generations is so far away now, so distant from them and their experiences. What are the ways in which we connect to somebody like Gerda's story? She literally is a 15-year-old girl when in 1939, when the war begins. She's literally 21 years old. She's lost her entire high school. You know, if you're going to teach this stuff to high school kids, she's it. She's their age. Because one of the powerful things we can do with any of these stories is connect to those people who were their age during this experience. That's one piece that we begin with. Her ability to recite a Goethe poem and recite it with irony, right? To make the sweeping gesture about the nobility of man when there's no nobility at all in that, in what her experience has been for those 5.5, 6 years that she experienced that. But maybe she's thinking about that moment, that just moment right there. And I think, you know, one of you articulated it, that metaphor of the door opens, literally the door opened, but metaphorically the door for her life opened. And it's an opportunity to get kids to think about that, to think on that sort of real level and on that metaphoric level, to make connections with someone who just died at the age of 97 and lived a long, long time ago in their world, but maybe not so long ago if we start to make the connections to our real world today. I'm going to set this mic down. Hopefully we don't get back. 2 years ago, if you were on Zoom 2 years ago, I don't know why Esther thought I could come back and say anything new. But 2 years ago, I was your speaker on Zoom. And I had a little slideshow and I articulated what I thought were sort of 6 guiding principles, 6 principles for teaching about the Holocaust. So here they are quickly. We'll explore them a little bit more, but we're going to do some other things too. And I'm mindful of the time. Start local, make it personal, step outside your bubble, ask hard questions, use media responsibly, and act, create, and engage. And I think in some ways we've already started to look at the first 2, start local and make it personal. But I'm rethinking some of this a little bit in the last couple of years. I think for teachers, many of you might be a little, if we think about starting local, we might be thinking about what are the local issues? What are the issues of anti-Semitism? What are the issues of hatred? What are the issues of silencing, of censorship, of book banning, of all those kinds of things that are happening in our own communities and our own schools? So starting local actually might be too close, too hot of an issue, too painful and too challenging, too politically charged. And so I don't know that you necessarily need to start local. We started tonight with Gerda, so she's not local at all. But I think what we did do is, if I could make a switch, it would be that we connect the local with the historical. So we either start with the local and we make the connection to the historical, or we start with those historical events and we allow students to make those connections to the local. And you all just did that. You did that beyond any lecture or any examples that I could throw up here. You made the connections. So that's one of the things that I think is powerful, is just the simple act of writing. In this case, very sort of free writing, not structured, where we just invite you or an audience or students to just stop for a second and have a very personal experience. So we make it personal in lots of ways. It might be because somebody comes up here who's a second-gen survivor and tells a very personal story and makes that connection for us too. But 1 and 2 go with each other, and they're pretty powerful. The other thing that I realized was, after I really started to study your Akron Council website, is that connecting that local and historical is something that's very important to you all. Why you do what you do. So give me a second, magic of the 21st century. I'm going to take you kind of quickly to your website and a bullet. Come on. Gotta get the little cursor, I guess. How does this work? There we go. Come on. I'm left-handed.
I feel so much better now.
Makes you feel. Yeah. We're going old school. There's a bullet list of why we do what we do. There are 7 items on this list. And these are, I don't know whether you've been to your own website and looked at any of these. If you haven't, go look at them. These are things that somebody put up on this website. I
So
don't
this
know.
whole thing will be recorded and put on the website as well, this whole program.
But several of these are stories about things that teachers or other folks are facing in communities in terms of anti-Semitism. Some of these other things. So one of these is a story, I won't go into super detail about it, but a school leader who tells teachers, we've heard this story right down in Texas, the school leader who tells teachers to balance their discussion of the Holocaust with the opposing view. Right? And we're all like, sorry for my French, but what the hell, how the hell do you have that conversation, right? Well, I guess you're gonna say, sorry, we have to watch it. Okay.
For NBC News exclusive, the new report in our series on the Texas school district at the center of a firestorm over diversity and inclusion efforts. Now, secretly recorded comments from a top administrator about books on the Holocaust are sparking new outrage. Antonia Hilton takes us back to South Lake.
Wes Frierson, a parent of 2 daughters in South Lake, is uncertain about his kids' education.
Well, some of the local politics right now, I'm not sure that teachers feel supported.
The district already in the spotlight after parents clashed over its diversity plan, now facing new pushback over which books are allowed in their libraries, with some teachers placing caution tape over bookshelves, calling the move censorship. It all started when a 4th grade teacher was reprimanded after a parent complained about her having a book about anti-racism.
I couldn't believe it. She's the kind of teacher that we would hope the district would be trying to attract.
The district sent educators with guidance to vet all books, instructing them to not allow singular perspectives that could be considered offensive. This coming after Texas passed a law banning the teaching of concepts that could make individuals feel guilt or anguish due to their race. NBC News obtained exclusive, secretly recorded audio of a school training.
We are in the middle of a political mess.
The director of curriculum, Gina Petty, offers an example for teachers. Balance books about the Holocaust with an opposing view.
To make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has other titles, the Holocaust.
Gina Petty did not respond to messages requesting comment. I met with 2 concerned teachers in South Lake. We obscured their identities because they feared speaking out could cost them their jobs.
I was in such shock when I heard these words. We felt this was necessary because we felt like no one was going to listen until a teacher spoke up.
And it's not just in South Lake. Across the country, educators are facing new policies restricting how they can educate students about race. From Tennessee to Pennsylvania, South Lake School District told NBC News they were helping teachers comply with Texas law, and the district has not and will not mandate books be removed.
The district says that they have not told teachers to ban books, to completely shut down libraries. What are you saying?
That's a lie. It is a flat out lie. Like, how could you even make that statement?
What do you think is at stake here?
In books, children see what the world can be, and to have that taken away because we're afraid of a few parents getting upset about a word or two or an idea that they've imagined is in a book is unthinkable.
Wes Frierson says his daughters see what's happening.
Unfortunately, for kids of the age of mine, I think the last thing, as they become aware of the world, I think they just see the world as very highly politicized.
But parents hope that politics find a way out of public schools. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, South Lake.
And you can hear more of our reporting on South Lake in our NBC.
Hold on to that, because I think that is one of those sort of local kinds of things that whoever put some of these bullet points up on your website is concerned about. And teachers who are in the room, you know, we may get a chance to have you talk a little bit about maybe some of your fears or concerns. Hold on to that curriculum director who said, you know, show opposing views. Just, I know as mind numbing as it is, just stick a pin in it and hold on to it for just a second, okay? Connect the local to the historical, make it personal, step outside your bubble. I'll talk about some of these as best I can. Ask hard questions, use media responsibly, act, create, engage. Let's just walk through some of these things. Now, while you have my 6, I also want to lay on top of it, the USHMM, United States Holocaust Memorial, has their own guidelines for teaching about the Holocaust. And this is actually pretty important. If you're thinking about doing this, if you're a teacher, they've been thinking about this for a good 20 or 30 years. Sam Troughton, who was one of the creators of this list of 10, has, shares an article. So again, if you have my technology, you can click there, Esther, and you can actually get.
He's gonna get it later.
I am going to get that. You can read Sam's article. There are some other articles too, concerns about, lots of people are concerned. I'm an English teacher by trade. I prepare students to go out and teach English. Oftentimes, students' first experiences of studying the Holocaust in school is actually in the English classroom, not the history classroom. It's the English teacher who might teach Anne Frank in 7th grade or Elie Wiesel's Night in about 9th grade or someplace like that, which is probably my experience. And English teachers by trade don't have the historical background. That's one of Sam Troughton's concerns, is that we need to step carefully through. There's some historical work that we need to do at the same time. History teachers, oftentimes, if they're pulling the material from the history textbook, it comes woefully decontextualized from these larger things. So the 10 bullet points try to address some of those things. The Holocaust guidelines, for instance, begin with, start any lesson, any of this, by first defining the term Holocaust so that we're all on the same page. So we understand there's a specific way of understanding and thinking about that term. And then we can come back to that. That becomes a touchstone. I'll read through these briefly. If you click on the blue guidelines word, it'll take you to the USHMM site where you can see not only the guidelines, but other, and I'll try to show this to you at the end too. I have some clickable links that take you to their guide, their work, their teaching materials, as well as materials from Echoes of Reflection and the ADL and Facing History and ourselves and some other organizations. Define it. Teach that the Holocaust was not inevitable, that it was a series of choices, that it's a series of actions. Avoid simple answers to complex questions, strive for precision. This is the bullet point I want to spend 2 seconds on. Strive to balance the perspectives that inform your study of the Holocaust. I think what these folks have been thinking about for the last 30 years is exactly what this curriculum director is worried about. That if you teach a book about the Holocaust, you're only teaching, in her mind, I think she's saying you're only giving one perspective. And I don't think we're doing that at all. I think if you look at this from if you look at the big picture of the Holocaust and take time to drill into these stories like Gerda's story or someone else's story, you are, by nature of doing that, looking at those multiple perspectives. It's something I said right at the beginning. The records, all the details, all the statistics, all the detailed evidence of the Holocaust is actually created by the perpetrators. They documented it all. You cannot study the Holocaust without studying their perspective. So don't think of it as both sides. That both sides is really, right? It creates this binary. But if you teach the larger perspective, if you teach all those sides, all those perspectives, bring in the Nazi perspective. They indict themselves with their philosophies and with the evidence that they documented. Tell their story, show what they did, show how they did it. One of the things that's receiving a lot more attention these days is the Holocaust by Bullets. Father Patrick DuBois' work for years with the Jihad in Unum group, meticulously going back into Ukraine and Lithuania over the years, talking with people who were, 12-year-old boy whose job was to drive a cart. They would load people's suitcases on them. A 12-year-old boy whose job was to dig a hole outside of town, who witnessed it all. These are eyewitnesses. They're not Jews making up lies, right? These are, local Lithuanians and Ukrainians who were there and who saw it and who are still alive to tell the story when they came back. So it's all there. The documentation is all there. Tell all of these stories. Tell those stories and tell Gerda's story and tell other survivor stories, because then we have then we have a powerful connection. We understand the historical, but we understand it from the human being side too. One of the other bullet points in this list is translate statistics into people, and this is exactly what we're talking about, right? If people were documented as a list of numbers, those are powerful numbers, but kids can't hold 6 million in their head, right? But maybe they could hold 6. Like in Toledo, we had 6 Holocaust survivors in 2010, and we were able to, a colleague of mine in the School of Digital Arts at Bowling Green State University was asked by the Jewish Federation to come and just document, sort of, Steven Spielberg style, capture their stories. And she said, let's go one step further. Can we create a documentary on this? And that's what Heather created. And I came in afterwards to help build curriculum and to write the grant to go on and to follow in the footsteps, to go find out where they lived, where they were born, what camps they went through, what ghettos they went through, and to tell this story from the inside and the outside. But so you can't hold 6, I don't know how many high school kids could hold 6 million in their head, but I can introduce you to 6, and you'll care for who they are at the end of the story, right? You'll care about Gerda, even though you've never met Gerda. So you translate those statistics into people, you make it human, you make it personal. You ask the hard questions, right? And we'll get to that. And you're doing what you all are doing here at Akron-Summit, which is asking, challenging students to act and create and engage. I'm not going to go through it. So I started with Gerda. What I did was took sort of really a US HMM lesson plan, stripped it down to what I wanted to do with it. They do a little bit more with it. If you click on some of those links, you'll see it. And it's just one example of some material that you don't have to invent this from scratch, and you can do this. Yeah.
Could you send this, to where we get a list, because then they can click once they get the email.
Yes, I will. All of this is, yes, and then you don't have it. So I will make this available for sure. The link down there is to the entire 39-minute, 40-minute documentary, the HBO documentary. It's on the Learning for Justice. This was the old Teaching Tolerance organization that rebranded itself as Learning for Justice a couple of years ago.
Is the part of Southern Law?
No, they're separate. Well, they're tolerant. Teaching for Tolerance is this. Yes. So it's connected to ADL, I think. Learning for Justice. If you go there, you can see a short little clip of Gerda's story. If you log in, if you become put your login information in, and you're not giving away anything too much here. But as teachers, if you're interested in this, there's a lesson plan. I'll take you to it very briefly right now. Oh. So it will take you to their website, and it comes with a teacher's guide for how to teach this. If you're going to teach it to sixth graders or to 12th graders, there's a short clip. If you click here, you can watch the entire documentary, but you need to go and sort of log in and join. But if you care about this, then you should go in and log in and have access to Teaching Tolerance or Learning for Justice's material. So this is really powerful stuff, and it's, again, another guide that, another gigantic bucket of material that you can go after. I rewatched this documentary this summer after Gerda died, and I actually reread her book. I thought I need to reread the book, and I guess I'd never seen the documentary, so I sat and watched the documentary. Those, multiple media sort of sources, that black ink on white paper text, having the video is really powerful for my learning experience. And guess what? It's really powerful for your little 21st century students who all live in a multimodal world where they read text and watch video. So rather than watching stupid TikTok videos, park their butts down in front of the computer or their iPad or their phone for 39 minutes and watch Gerda tell her story, and Kurt too, among other things that we can watch. How am I doing on time? It's almost 5 o'clock, and I know we have many other important people. So I'm going to play through this kind of quickly. 2 years ago, I showed you that slide on the left. My apologies for anyone who's under the age of whatever, who might be scandalized by that word. I'll try to show you an example of it by the end of my slide. This was a real thing that was written on someone's garage door in Sylvania, Ohio. Sylvania, Ohio is a suburb of Toledo. It's where most of the Jewish community lives. It's where most of our Muslim community lives. Our Hindu community, lots of doctors and lawyers and business professionals live in Sylvania, Ohio. That was written on a door. And you can see, you know, as Marilyn said, why are we still having this conversation in 2017 or 2022, going on 2023? And it's very painful, but you can see, we don't need to work hard to connect the local, to connect to the current, to the historical. It's happening every day. And all we need to do is figure out how we're going to manage this, how comfortable we are to have these conversations with students or with others in the community. And you'll have to find that for yourself. I'm going to come back to that slide at some point quick. But making it personal, we wrote about it. I showed this video 2 years ago, and I won't show it again, but it's a short little 2 or 3 minute video from the Auschwitz Museum, and it's very powerful. It focuses in on some objects, and it helps you make a personal connection. Do you want to watch it? Yes. Did you watch it? Do you remember this from 2 years ago? No. It's worth a watch. I'll have tears
The shoe at the end was so powerful, connecting them back to the human person. Wow.
And we could have a long discussion about that film and the power of the personal, the power of, you know, so think about this, because your students are going to do some art projects, your students are going to do some writing. I think I've looked on your website, some of your art projects were 3D, three-dimensional art, you know, artifact kinds of things. Think about objects and artifacts. Think about those things that if you've gone to Auschwitz or if you've gone to USHMM in Washington, D.C. and stood there and looked at those piles of shoes, piles of suitcases, piles of reading glasses that look identical to those, little blonde ponytails that look exactly like my little daughter that I just got married last weekend, who used to, you know, I'd braid her hair and put it in little ponytails like that. There's a glass room full of little ponytails exactly like my daughter's.
Yeah. Can you comment?
Please.
About two things. One, if you don't go and sign up for the newsletter as an educator, you're missing something, because they produce a fabulous newsletter every month and it provides lots of educational stuff in it. It is one of the best newsletters I've ever seen.
There's a lot of things on our website that
comes out from there. Yeah. The other one is, if you've gone to the museum, you thought, I've been there once, don't think that. Go, the special exhibit in the basement rotates every 2 years. So every 2 years, you're gonna hear a new story about another part.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off because we have a number of people who want to
Yep.
talk about it later.
So hold on to all
That's
this.
okay.
But keep this in mind, right? Personalize the experience. Maybe it's meeting a survivor or a second gen or a third generation, hearing them speak, or watching short video clips like we've done. It accomplishes maybe what no textbook can do, what you can't do standing up and lecturing, right? Think of images, films, memoir, novels. Think of children's picture books like the book that's sitting over there. Think about ways in which we peer into another's life and maybe are invited to sort of step outside our own culture and step into someone else's culture. Think about artifacts that kids can touch. The photocopy of someone's passport or someone's ID card from the Woods Ghetto or someplace like that. And think about the way in which we help kids in the 21st century connect physically to history.
A great project for any grade at all. This was developed by Amy Ross, who is a fellow at the museum. You have your kids go online and find pictures of families, children, activities pre-war.
Pre-war.
Then after they have found the picture, they check them out, where was this taken, what year was this taken, what were they doing, etc. Then they go home and find similar pictures in their parents' scrapbooks. And they compare the two pictures, and it shows the kids that whether it was 1936, 37, 38, or whether it was 1918, 1912, 2012, that people are the same, children are the same, families are the same. And then they make almost like a collage, a comparison contrast. And it really hits home to them because that way they realize that it's not so different. Great project.
And so I'm overstaying my welcome, so I'm gonna touch on a couple of things. I've been thinking a lot about in COVID, we all climbed inside of our little bubble and we, only allowed people in, right, Esther, who we thought were safe, who we would breathe with. But it made me realize that we spent a lot of our time in bubbles for years. And I jokingly say this about, we used to say as kids that we thought my dad should run for mayor of Toledo because we thought he knew everybody in the city of Toledo. What we didn't realize was he knew everybody that was Catholic. Everybody who was in our little Catholic bubble, he knew, and I never met a Jew as growing up as a kid that I knew of. And so we live in our little bubbles. And so one of the challenges for me is to get kids outside those bubbles and get teachers comfortable working with kids outside those comfort zones. Those teachers in Texas, you can't, some of the concerns of folks are that you can't read anything that will make a kid feel guilty or make a kid feel uncomfortable. Don't get me started because I could go into Vygotsky's theory about learning, which is that there isn't any learning happening unless you step outside your comfort zone, unless you step outside your zone of development and you make this leap across to a zone of proximal or potential development. We don't learn unless we're challenged off into a space where we don't know things, and then we have to learn. So that's how learning takes place. You have to get outside your comfort zone. And the only thing I will say is Gloria Ladson-Billings, 30 years ago, started to develop this theory of culturally relevant pedagogy. It's actually been sort of misunderstood and misaligned. Here are the 3 bullet points of culturally relevant pedagogy. Focus on student achievement, cultural competence, and cultural critique. In short, effective teaching should promote student achievement for all students in the classroom. Engage students in cultural competence, and cultural competence is this. Cultural competence in your own culture, you should know about your own culture, learn about it. And cultural competence in at least one other culture. Get outside your bubble and learn about somebody else's culture. And help students to recognize, understand, and critique the current social inequities. We could talk more about that, but challenging all kinds of kids to learn about the Holocaust. But challenging, we could go into that. Don't get me started. There's more to do, more work to do. Ask hard questions. I'm going to run out of time. But there are lots of hard questions. I know one of the questions that kids often ask is, why didn't the Jews resist? Why didn't they resist? Thank you. And my next point is this. So here's a great book by Arthur Shostak. It came out a couple years ago. He's a sociologist. He's actually in his retirement, meticulously researching all kinds of documenting stories from the Holocaust. And part of what Shostak's doing in this book, Stealth Altruism, is he's saying so stealth altruism is a secret, unarmed efforts to provide care in violation of the Nazi rules, in full knowledge of the risks entailed and with no expectation of material reward. He goes into details. There's a picture on the cover. It's a famous photograph. Strips it down, colorizes just the three guys in the front. And what you see are two guys holding up another guy. He would not make that roll call that morning. And they are just this little act of keeping that guy on his feet is an act of stealth altruism. These guys know that if they're helping this guy, all three of them could be dead, but they're going to do it anyway. So he documents a gazillion of these stories. Ruth Kluger's story is off the charts. I know I'm not going to read Ruth's story, but you'll come to get this PowerPoint and you can read it. But it is a powerful story out of Arthur Shostak's book about a moment of stealth altruism that tells its own story. Teachers you can use it. Well, this is a big important thing for me, and then I'm going to end this. I know. Use media responsibly, and there's layers to this, right? Study how the Nazis used media. Study what they did. My colleague, Marilyn Feldman, has a fantastic PowerPoint and a lesson plan. I've actually linked to it without her full permission. I'll delete the link if she says no. But she has some amazing material that teaches kids how to look closely at some of the propaganda and see how they manipulated visual images and some things like that. Explore where the Nazis got some of their ideas for propaganda in USA. Explore how media is manipulated today. And then teach your kids to use media in some responsible ways. We developed a project with our college students to create artifacts that had those QR codes so that if someone opened a suitcase and grabbed the apple and put their phone on the QR code, they would get a story about one of our 6 survivors, and the apple is sort of central to the story. That's all I can tell you at the moment. And teach your students this, because your kids live in the era of the selfie, and there's some really powerful and awkward things happening, like selfies at Auschwitz, right? Like here's a kid who's saying, I was here, this was important, this was valuable, and they put it up on their Facebook feed with a big smile at Auschwitz, and then suddenly the internet blows up because what the heck are you doing? And why? And are you tasteless and senseless to do this kind of thing? So we've got kids who are living in a media world that you and I didn't grow up with, and they need guidance. Anyway, I've overstayed my welcome. You're going to act and create, do some amazing things. Here's one of the things that one of your kids did a year or so ago. Someone talked about strength somewhere. You're doing some powerful stuff, and kids can make a difference. Here's one that's new. There's a garage door. There it was the next day. So that's awesome. People tried to wipe it off, and you can see it just smeared, and they couldn't wipe it off. So they told them this story. Anyway, I've overstayed my welcome. We got other things to do.
When you live long enough, you meet amazing people. And Tim Yearman is one of my amazing people. And so are each and every one of you. It's very hard to keep to order, but we're going to be ordered. We're going to take this snack. The vacuum directly across. That gives us like 3 minutes to put four chairs behind the table because we're going to have a chance to hear from Secretary.
I just wanted to say this. When you come back, if you can, especially for the teachers who are here, who are newcomers or teachers that are here, we'd like to fill these 2 or 3 tables here first. So try not to sit in the back, try to fill these tables when you come back. Enjoy the 3-minute break, snacks, bathrooms. We'll see you in 3 minutes. Thank you so much. And everybody online, just hang for 2 minutes, and then we'll start again. So just chill. We'll come back to you soon.
We have more books. Eric?
We need to know. Or what do you want to?
Yeah, I want to do your paragraph.
It's too long. Oh, this.
It's not too long.
Okay, good. So let's get this organized. So do you think we should move this out of the way?
Move that in.
What?
Just move this camera.
So this is staying where it is?
Yeah. Because otherwise it'll be blocked.
What's that? Where are you gonna sit up? Sit up?
We're gonna just, no, we're gonna turn this
So
around.
let's turn it around. Let's check it. Let's
Okay.
check out, check the screen. Because part of what I noticed was that.
Aaron, where's Aaron?
She's right outside in the lobby.
Let's get Aaron out here, because she can do it.
It's gonna follow whatever. Because I'm trying to figure out. Too far back. Yeah, I agree. That's what I was trying to tell Martin. Hey, Tim. If you get people starting to see like move all those books. Okay, good.
In fact, let me come.
Let's just.
Brian, do you want us in sort of order? Do you want us?
No, that doesn't matter. I'm just trying to figure out. I want to be able to keep this. So there's slide.
No, I'm good.
This is neutral, but not too much. We can move the camera anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
In fact,
Nope,
Aaron, you might want to even put the.
we could do it right there.
If you feel it's safe enough to put it between the two. Oh, how's that?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Does that work?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay,
I'm just gonna move this table back a little bit.
Aaron, we have one more job for you to come back.
I think what we could do, we should actually try to,
You want everybody to come closer. You know, why am I? Are they going to each sit?
they're gonna say, we're not gonna use it, I'm just gonna say. Hey, Aaron.
She likes fifth grade too. That's right. So she's read, what really, she's fifth grade, and really like sort of accelerated this program, like pick up with and all of those groups, like online. Previously, I had read all the together, and then she read all the nice herself, and then she, so she'll read it, and she'll also.
So she will do these three tables.
No.
Yes. We're gonna ask everyone to come to these. If your teachers or anybody. Educators, administrative office.
Because I missed you. Right. Yeah. So you mean like, I know, honestly, my only concern, I'll read anything. Because I figure she's self.
There's too much feedback.
You know, she's pretty good for making it. So, like, I don't really like
Test, check.
Check.
I think I was.
But there's another one.
Now we're moving to the panel. Brian, want to talk to the moderate panel, please. Brian, want to talk to the moderate panel. Brian is founder and CEO of Nimble Learning Strategy, with clients from nonprofits to Fortune 500. He has a strong commitment to serving as a volunteer leader inside and outside the Jewish community, including the trustee of the Jewish Community Board of Akron. As an honored participant in the Mayor Citizen Initiative, as a member of the City of Akron Racial Equality Task Force, is now a consultant for JCPA. So let's call on Brian, who's going to run the program from now on.
Great. Hi, everybody. Give me 1 second. I'm not going to what's in the back room.
Watch out, this is about you.
People who select tables for a living, as most teachers do in the standard.
Exactly.
Can they hear me so I can sit here and talk about people? Oh, great.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. You know, Esther and Marty have thanked you. I want to thank you as well. I want to say thank you to Dr. Mernon for being here earlier. It was a great presentation. Let's give him another round of applause. Dr. Mernon mentioned that many times Holocaust is actually taught in English class and not in history class. I grew up in Cleveland Heights, went to Cleveland Heights High School, go Tigers, born and raised Jewish, knew about the Holocaust, I don't know, at some point in Hebrew school when I was younger. And when I got to 11th grade at Cleveland Heights High School in the late 80s, I was fortunate enough to, you could choose electives. So one semester I chose satire, and the next semester I chose literature of the Holocaust. Mrs. Rubinsky was my teacher. People are nodding their heads, you know Mrs. Rubinsky, right?
She just died recently.
Sadly, she did. And she was one of the first teachers in Ohio to teach the Holocaust. So I wasn't even that close with her, to be honest with you. But right now I'm being a little choked up because her legacy of the amazing work that I didn't even understand what she was doing at the time really holds on. But here's what I want to impress upon you as educators. I could not believe that in a diverse community like Cleveland Heights, that my non-Jewish friends at 11th grade, 16, 17 years old, had no clue what the Holocaust was. My friends, I'm gonna be certificate from it. My friends in Parma, sure, I get it. It's a very, not, at least at the time, was not very diverse. But in Cleveland Heights, you didn't know what the Holocaust was? I was frustrated and sad and angry. Mr. Rubinsky was very firm in trying to impress upon us the importance of this topic. And I learned a lot. As much as I thought I knew, I learned so much. But she was also, I think, graceful and compassionate of meeting us where we were as 16-year-old kids and not always having the maturity to handle these tough topics. So yes, let's challenge those students to take on those hard questions and let's meet them where they are. I'm telling you stuff you already know, you're educators. But I just want you from a personal story, we're talking about personal stories today. That's my personal story. That I felt like it was okay to wrestle with these things and not understand them and come to them over time. Dr. Mernon asked us to write some things down, or a few things, and You mentioned asking hard questions. So these are the questions that came to mind when we watched Gerda's story. What are the stories we take for granted? What are the stories we accidentally ignore? What are the stories we can illuminate and connect with our own? And so right now we're about to hear personal stories from friends of mine, community members, about being second generation Holocaust survivors. And so I ask you to maybe ponder those questions as we listen to their stories. For the most part, they're just going to talk. I'm just here to kind of tee things up, maybe ask 1 or 2 questions, and if time, we'll put some questions to you. And if not, you can stay afterwards and schmooze with them. Our panelists are the children of Holocaust survivors. We have Andrew Rabinowitz, could you say wave hi? There you go. Dave Mink, Daniel Blaine, and last but not least, Dr. Marta Roth. So we're just going to go down, starting with Daniel, all the way down to Marta, and have them share their stories.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone coming today. This is really a pretty powerful experience for me. My father, Michael Blaine, passed away in May. So, and his passing away followed the loss of 2 close friends, also survivors, Joe Klein and Teddy Hirsch. And it's a very, and then I knew that Gerda Klein had passed away. I didn't know that was in April. So we're really looking at a generation that is not going to be with us much longer. And I think that adds a whole different challenge and dynamic that we no longer are going to be able to rely on the firsthand testimonies like we have perhaps with some impact in the past. And I say some impact because you and many others have been doing this work for so many years and are very passionate about it. And yet we see that we're living in a world that isn't quite cooperating, to put it mildly. I get every morning Boker Tov Cleveland. It's the headlines from the Cleveland Jewish News. I just want to share with you this morning's headline. So the first one is vandals overturn Hillel Sukkah at Miami University. Okay, hard to know. It could just be fraternity hijinks, or it could be something more sinister, but it doesn't feel very nice. I turn the page, and then we have a Columbus area candidate defends Jew you down comment. Facing criticism about her use in 2014 of the anti-Semitic phrase Jew you down, the Republican nominee for competitive state Senate seat in Ohio said she was just trying to praise Jews' frugality. Okay. Yeah, faint praise. Turn the page, and we get to Kanye West. Now, I actually love the music of Kanye West, but I can't listen to it anymore. What I'm sure all of you have heard about his remarks. Hopefully you know who he is. He's a very prominent musician and performer. He was married to Kim Kardashian, who I actually now have some Rahmanas for, which is pretty incredible. But Kanye had some very anti-Semitic comments. And today in LA, a group called the Goyim Defense League went up on a bridge and hung a banner over one of the LA highways saying Kanye is right about the Jews. And it was from the Goyim Defense League, and they were giving Hitler salutes. So you have Kanye, who may or may not be dealing with some mental illness as well, and how another group, which is probably not that into the music of Kanye West, is embracing it because it's an opportunity for them to step out with their own work. And then the last one, and Brian, it was interesting you mentioned Beatrice Rubinsky, was that there's going to be a 50th anniversary at Heights High of the work of Beatrice and being really one of the first high schools in the country that kind of took that on very seriously. And again, to me, that comes back to we're at this pivotal point where we're losing the survivor generation, and there's a lot of pretty bad stuff going on in the world. Now, this strikes me because even though my father was a survivor and was very open about his experiences and did a lot of talking to school groups, he was also a very positive, hopeful person, by his nature. And I grew up, I never experienced any anti-Semitism directly. I knew what had happened to my father's family and to him. But I was left in a pretty positive place in terms of being Jewish in America. I have to say, I no longer feel that. And I think we're living in a really dangerous time. Social media only magnifies it. And I think it just strikes me that what's worked perhaps somewhat in the past, we're going to have to double down and find some very new strategies. When the Hadid sisters, Dua Lipa, another musician I can no longer listen to, and Kanye West have 250 million followers on Instagram and Twitter, those messages are going out to people who may not be the most well-informed or critical thinkers. And it only kind of ups the ante for us. I feel positive that people like you are here, and a lot of people care very much about this issue and recognize that that the impact and the example goes well beyond the Holocaust to issues around hate and genocide.
Before you move on, can you just share a minute or two about your father, if you feel comfortable, your experience as a second generation Holocaust survivor? And anyway, anything you want, just two minutes or so.
Yeah, so my father actually was born in Czechoslovakia, and he left home in 1942 at age 14. That alone is like unbelievable to me because, you know, my kids, when they were 14, I was nervous about them crossing the street. He went to Budapest to become an apprentice in leather works. And while he was gone, the Nazis basically came through his town and they took his family. And most of them perished at Auschwitz. And he has a remarkable story of turning right, and if he had turned left, he would have been captured, or deciding to go tomorrow and not today. And then again, I think if you talk to and hear from survivors, everyone has that kind of remarkable story because you would not have survived otherwise. And to hear the story about Gordon Klein again, and I never understood, and still don't, how people like my father persevered through this and built new lives and remained positive and hopeful. And if I can carry some of that in my own life, then I think we've both done well.
Thank you. Andrea next.
Hi, my name is Andrea Romanovitz, and I started doing some Holocaust presentations in honor of my mother and my grandparents' memory. Holocaust education was very important to my mom. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of history and personal. It was 1933 in Augsburg, Germany, where my grandparents, Teresa and Louis Lustig, were living and raising a 5-year-old daughter. Joanne was my mother. My grandfather sold men's suits, and my grandmother's family owned a department store in Munich. It is this time when they personally experienced the growing rise of Nazi power. My grandmother's eldest brother, Erwin, was arrested for living with a non-Jewish woman. For this crime, he was sent to Dachau, which had just opened, and he was shot, where he was shot. After being taken to a hospital where he later died, his father was sent the bill for the expenses. The Nuremberg laws keeping Jews out of German society was also starting to be enforced. This is when my mother started to notice changes around her. Simple joys like going to see her favorite movie Heidi were no longer allowed. She could no longer walk through the park on her way home from school for fear of encountering the Hitler Youth. On November 9th, 1938, my grandfather was arrested during Kristallnacht. For a month, his family had no idea that he had been taken to Dachau. He luckily was released with other men when a commander of the camp knew them as comrades from World War I. Upon his return home, he continued writing letters to family in America to obtain a sponsor. With sponsorships and visas, their plan was to leave Germany on September 1st, 1939. After my great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, saw unusual activity at the Munich train station, they expedited their departure on August 26, 1939, with one suitcase and $5 each. They started the first leg of their journey, going through Holland to England. Their ship was delayed in England because it was being painted a battleship gray for camouflage. Not long after departing, the captain announced that Germany had invaded Poland, which was the beginning of World War II. They left many relatives behind who perished in Auschwitz and Theresienstadt. While they were out of danger, they still had the challenges of adapting to their language and culture in America. To fit in, my grandfather made the decision to change his name from Ludwig to Louis, and my mother's name from Hansi to Joy. Excuse me. It was her name change that represented a big sense of loss. For a long time, she questioned whether she was a survivor. She felt only those who survived concentration camps were considered survivors. But someone else in her same situation said, "You did survive, right?" And she said, "Yeah, well, you're a survivor." They didn't talk much about these experiences, but did talk about family and their childhoods. After discovering the letters her grandparents wrote to my grandmother, she documented the experiences in a book that was given to each child and grandchild so they can pass on the story and never forget. And this is what the legacy that she gave us. And she died soon after finishing it. It took her about 18 months to do this. And she had to use her 10-year-old German in order to translate the letters. And those are now at the Holocaust Museum.
Thank you, Andrea, very much. Dan, please. David.
Hi, thanks for being here. So I'm also the child of survivors. My father and my mother are both Holocaust survivors. And and they took entirely different paths to survive when they met after the war. My father was born and raised in Germany. He had one brother, and in the run-up to the war, things were going pretty bad. And his brother was shipped to the UK, managed to survive on one of the kinder transports as a result of that.
Just briefly, for those who may not know, can you describe what a kinder transport is?
It was funded, I think, mostly by Jewish organizations, and enabled loads of adolescents, young adolescents, to be transported by train or otherwise from Germany into the UK, where they were accepted by different agencies and then placed with families. My father was younger, stayed with his parents. My grandfather actually was arrested and put in Buchenwald. And in an amazing story, my grandmother negotiated his release for a weekend pass. She was the, as she said, to use her words, the assistant camp commandant's wife was her childhood friend, or as she said it in her native language, her childhood sweetheart. And so by deeding over all their property to the Nazi Socialist Party as a donation, my grandfather got a weekend pass. So they brought him home Friday evening for Shabbat, and they said, "We'll be back to pick you up Sunday afternoon." Because he only spent 4 months in Buchenwald, he knew what the story was, and so they split. My father and my grandfather smuggled as illegal immigrants through Germany across the border and wound up in Belgium. And then to Antwerp. My grandmother took another route through Switzerland and also ultimately joined them. Then they had a whole nother series of adventures through the war. They ultimately got into Switzerland and survived. And that was that train. My mother had an entirely different path. She was sheltered by a Christian family, or they weren't ardent Christians, but they were not Jewish family. 3 branches of that family were resistors, and they cooperated to shelter her, and her mother and younger brother and father were all killed in the Holocaust. After a lapse of many years, actually, a grandchild of the family reached out and we made a connection. And after learning more about that story, I was able to document that and get them recognized as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem. And we had a lovely recognition at the Israeli embassy in Belgium. And in fact, my uncle survived and his wife survived by an entirely different route. She made her way to Italy and was taken in by a family there. And Italy in the beginning of the war was not occupied by the Germans, and Mussolini was not as vigorous in the anti-Semitic campaign. And I guess my point is that each one of these survivors had a very, very personal, different way of surviving. And each one was befriended and sheltered by 100 different acts by individuals along the way. And my father actually wrote a series of columns for a synagogue at one point, and we collected them into his stories. And time again, it was chance, it was incredible bravery, but there's also individual acts of responsibility that people said, I will help you, I will take a risk. Either I'll donate money for a kinder transport, or I'll make a transfer to get you to Italy, or I will distract a guard a gendarme who's just come on the bus and is going to check papers, and a woman got up that was sitting next to him, took the gendarme's arm and said, hey, you know, isn't it time for a rest stop? Can't you go for a cup of coffee? And so there's no escaping individual responsibility. And we can see it over and over again. It's just not the Holocaust, of course, it's genocide, it's what's going on in Ukraine, it's what went on in Cambodia with Pol Pot. And just one final note, I shudder every time there's sort of an excuse by saying, oh, Putin's crazy, or Hitler was crazy, or even the kids who killed 17 people in the school in Florida, you know, is crazy. I've lost my patience with that. I think it's really individual choices that occur over and over again.
Thank you, Dan. Before we move on to Mark, Dr. Roth, just a moment, I want to add to something you said that I heard. I'm just reflecting something I heard you said at other times when you told the story, which tonight you're focusing on responsibility. I've also heard you describe it in addition to responsibility as acts of kindness, acts of bravery, right? And so it's all those things. I'm just using your own words I've heard you say before, and just want to underline that as well. So thank you for sharing your story. And last but not least, Dr. Marta Roth, please. Sorry, just Marta. Just Marta. She's like Madonna. Just Marta. Okay, Marta, go for it.
All right. Hello, everyone. I have never spoken publicly. And, oops. Is that better? Is that better? Yeah. Okay. I'm not a public speaker, and this is an emotional topic for me. So just bear with me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So again, my name is Marta. I was closer. Yeah. I was born in Czechoslovakia. 4 years after my parents were liberated from concentration camps. My mother, Marie Miriam Feldman, was born in 1926 in what then was eastern part of Czechoslovakia, currently western Ukraine, Carpathian mountain region. My mother was one of 8 children. She was the penultimate, five girls, three boys. In 1944, when she was 18 years old, Germans invaded the region where she, and occupied the region where she lived, and they were all deported to Auschwitz. My mother, her 4 sisters, arrived in Auschwitz in April of 1944. They were immediately separated from their mother, who went directly to gas chamber. My mother and her sisters were assigned to work in Canada. It was called the Canada section, close to the gas chambers, where all the belongings of everyone who came through the camp were sorted out.
So just to underline that, the images we saw in that video that you showed earlier that morning are representative of what your mother went through in terms of actually seeing those belongings, those shoes, those glasses.
And what I'm going to say now was told to me by mother's youngest sister, who is today is her birthday. She's 93, living in New York City. She was 14 when she arrived in Auschwitz. 3 weeks into their work on the piles, she came across a little pillow that she had embroidered for her 2-year-old niece. Yeah. So my mother and her sisters were in Auschwitz until January of 1945, and then went on death march to Germany, were in Ravensbrück for a few months, where my mother was painting swastikas on the planes, German planes. Subsequent death march to Neustadt-Gröbe near Hamburg, where they were liberated in May of 1945. All sisters survived because they were all supporting each other all the time. And yesterday I was talking to my aunt, who said your mother was the leader. That on the death march, they went along trains, and there was some water dripping from the locomotive, and one of my mother's sisters had typhoid at the time. So my mom went and just to get drops of water from under the locomotive to give to her sister. My father, Otto Bloch, was the only child of Marta and Leo Bloch. He came from western part of Czechoslovakia, called the Sudetenland, that was annexed to Germany after the Munich Conference agreement in 1938. At that time, all the Jews left the city Teplitz, where he grew up, and went inland. And he was no longer allowed to go to school, and for the next 3 years worked as a laborer on building a railroad and highways. And during that time, he developed such skills that helped him through concentration camp. The family was deported to Terezin concentration camp in May of 1942. My father worked there as a carpenter, and his skills came to the attention of the camp commandant, Karl Rahm, who respected him and pulled my father and grandfather from a transport to Auschwitz on 2 occasions. And after the second time, Rahm evidently gave an order that neither my father nor his dad were to be put on another transport in the future. So they survived and were liberated in Terezin concentration camp in May of 1945. My grandma, however, died there on December 12, 1943, at age 46 of starvation. My parents met after the war. They were, from complete opposite parts of Czechoslovakia. My mom from the extreme east, my dad from the extreme west. They did meet in the area where my dad grew up. Evidently, many Jews from the Carpathian region who had survived moved to that area. There was a large synagogue, and they were able to essentially practice their religion and continue to live. Though it was all short-lived, because in 1948, Czechoslovakia became communist, and majority of the survivors have left the country.
Marta, I want to pause you for just one moment, just for time's sake, because there's a little more of a program afterwards.
Okay.
Can you just shift to, when they moved here to the States, and specifically, what was it like for you to learn that they had survived the Holocaust? What was that like for you, and how did they manage that?
Okay. So I didn't know I was Jewish until second grade, when my sister came home from school. Someone had called her Jew. My parents, we were the only Jewish family in town. It was in the 50s, and they were anti-Semitic. There was a new brand of anti-Semitism in Czechoslovakia. I don't know if you recall the political trials that started under Stalin in the Soviet Union. They then also took place in Czechoslovakia. And in 1950s, 3 out of 13 people who were hanged, 11 were Jews. And some of them had survived the concentration camp. Okay. So my parents kept their identity secret from us. We did not get any Jewish religion. No, there was really no tradition. I think when I was a teenager, I finally heard some words of Lager meaning a camp in German. I heard the word Auschwitz in Czech. I heard Terezin, but not much of what went on. All I knew that I did not have grandmothers, we didn't have aunts, we didn't have uncles, we didn't have cousins. When I was 17, 1966, we escaped from Czechoslovakia and then lived for several months in Israel. Thereafter in West Berlin for a couple of years prior to arriving in New York City to be reunited with my mother's sisters, and that was 1969.
Wow, what a reunion that must have been.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like we could be here for another 6 hours.
I know, that's fine.
To hear all of your stories. I want to say thank you for sharing your story. I really do. I want to ask one last question of the panel, and then I'm going to hand that back. I'm going to ask the panel, just in a sentence or two, what, obviously the educators, they're smart, intelligent people. Some of them may have already taken on Holocaust education in one form or another. Some might be starting now. What's one thing that you want them to take away from this whole experience today that maybe they haven't thought of yet, or from something from your personal perspective? What do you want them to take away? So I'm gonna start again with Dan. I'm gonna pass the mic down.
Wait for the mic. Great question. I would say the impact of small and even random acts of kindness, because I think that's a theme we heard over and over for decline from David talking about his family's experience. And you often don't know where an act of kindness will lead, and perhaps most of them just make someone feel good, but they can even go well beyond that. And I guess courage and kindness is probably a better way to say it.
And as we pass the mic to Andrew, I just want to tie that back to our students, right? Like, they're living through a very hard time if they're in high school or junior high, right? Where kindness and courage might not be the easiest thing to hold on to. And how can we be advisors, mentors, leaders for them to even attempt to be kind to that person who maybe needs some extra kindness, or be courageous to sit with someone who's not popular, or all those kinds of things that aren't the Holocaust, but are very real to them, I'll pass it on to you.
I wish I could be as positive. I am very fearful for my children and my grandchildren. After studying history of the pre-Holocaust time, I think that we need to be well aware of what history was then and what it is now. An experience that my granddaughter just had at school is that there was a new student in the school, a Black student, who a boy came up to her and said, "Go back to your own country." And my granddaughter was appalled.
Your granddaughter is 11?
11. She's 11. She's in 5th grade. And she then was concerned after this incident, oh, do I have to tell my teacher why I'm going to be out of school for the Jewish holidays? It became a big concern of hers that that she would get that kind of reaction or get taunted by a student. And she's very much aware of our family history. In fact, they just went to Washington, D.C., and she had a choice of picking a place to go visit. They had one day there, and she picked the Holocaust Museum. So I know that it's forefront in her mind. And that's my concern is, and I don't envy any educator today, because you really do have to deal with so many different points of view and a lot of hate, I think.
Yeah, I guess I would go back to the point I made about individual acts of responsibility. Beyond random acts of kindness, I think that young people are confronted with lots of opportunities, not related strictly to the Holocaust, but if you think of the pre-Holocaust period, there's anti-Semitism, there's racial hatred of all kinds, there's other kinds of hate, discrimination that is evidenced. And it's really important to avoid these generalizations, stereotypes, and it takes a lot of courage for an adolescent to stand up and say, hey, you know, we shouldn't really be using a racist slur. We shouldn't be circulating racist cartoons or adopting a swastika even as a joke, you know, and to try and boost the awareness that the kids do have choices, you know, and it's not always a catastrophe that's in front of you.
I'm just thinking what my parents would think of today's world, United States, and world at large. Because to them, as we were immigrating to this country, United States was the best place in the world. And to read and listen daily to the resurgence of hatred and intolerance is really very bothersome. And I don't know whether we can fix it.
I'll just wrap up by saying anti-Semitism, racism, and all the other isms have been around for a long time. And I don't know if we're going to fix them. But what we can do is we have evolved, right? If you think about history overall, there has been an evolution of how we treat one another and things of that nature. And so I think that it's about not so much changing the world. It sounds super cliche, I'm sure you've heard before, but not so much changing the world, but changing one person's world. How can you be an inspiration to those one or two or few students in your classroom who can relate to something, who can go on to be the next person who does something courageous or kind or brave in that moment, in high school, in college, and beyond. And so that's what I would add to this conversation. I want to thank our panelists for giving me a round of applause. All our educators who came today, we really do appreciate it. I've been thanked a lot, but we can't thank you enough.
We have one final short presentation and then some final comments. Renee Pinsky is going to talk about the program for the spring for art and writing.
I want to add my thanks to Tim and to all of you for coming. I've been the coordinator of the art part of the contest for several years, and we have family history too, but I'm not from Akron, and but I have to say it's very unusual. This contest and the commemoration was originally sponsored by the city in the spring of 1986, and it's completely unusual for this to be a city sponsored, a contest and commemoration, because it's not just a Jewish problem, it's a humanitarian problem, and it's a problem. So I'm very proud to be part of it in that regard. But for the contest was begun 2 years after the commemoration. And that's because the city believed in the importance of learning the lessons of the Holocaust in our schools. And it was directed at Holocaust education in middle and high schools in Akron and the surrounding Summit County area. What we're sponsored by now is this Akron-Summit Council on Holocaust and Genocide Education. We're separate from the city now. But we are operating with the financial and technical help of Summit County under our county executive, Eileen Shapiro, and the financial help of the city of Akron under Mayor Daniel Harrigan, and of course from the financial support of the community. And our primary project of this council is to sponsor the annual Akron-Summit Holocaust Arts and Writing Contest, as well as this teacher support in education. So this year's contest theme, thank you, Tim, is Lest We Forget, Preserving the Record of the Holocaust. We explored. We have, it's separated, the contest is separated in Division 1, 6th through 8th grade, and Division 2, 9th through 12th grade. And all of these details, the rubrics, whatever, is all on our website. So if you can go, but there have been a few, for those of you who have been participated in the past, there's a few changes. There's only going to be individual entries. Sometimes they had a collaborative entry before, but they found that this was diminishing, and the committee felt we're going to try this year. There's only going to be individual entries. And also the writing has been split into 2 categories, basically fiction and nonfiction. So something, writing could be completely creative and or really fact-based, and there's a lot of prompts also on the website and things that can lead you and have your students to approach this for the writing, and also for the end. And we found that students, they might want to have art and writing connected, and we decided that you could enter in both categories. So this one, an individual one, if they could pick one kind of writing, not both, and art if they wanted to submit something, but if they came out on the top, you couldn't win, have a place prize in both categories. That would be a decision on which to pick, but if they chose to do that, more power to them, because the whole point is to approach, the topic as the kids feel they can. There's a whole list of requirements and guidelines. Some things are in red, because we don't want anybody to be disqualified. So there's, like I said, there's additional resources. recommendations on starting and prompts are all going to be on the website. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact by email or call Laura or Ralph, who back there is our coordinator. And all of this together today. She's been amazing. So thank you very much for coming.
I want to thank Tim, I want to thank Esther, I want to thank our panel, I want to thank everyone for coming as well. A couple comments which I have to make. I'm Lori and members of the council, people who are members of the council, please stand so we can see who you are. Come on, there we go, there we go. There's an amazing group of people to work with that I really enjoyed. Two quick things. Besides Tim's program today, which we're going to put on our website, which means we'll be able to click on the website for those of us that don't know how to click. You can sort of do that in that scenario. But there's a lot of other material on that website, right? And the website, Laura, real loud.
Akron-Summit Holocaust Education.org.
Akron-Summit Education.
It's in the brochure. It's also in the program.
It's in the program as well. And also, I sort of want to tell a story, plenty of food here. I want to tell a short story. You heard individuals talk about their experiences. I'm not the child of a Holocaust survivor or the grandchild of a Holocaust survivor. My uncle Dave was someone who helped liberate the camps. But the story that I want to tell was I was a sophomore in high school many moons ago. And I took German. Why did I take German? So I could understand my parents, right? We spoke Yiddish. It was the only way I could sort of understand my parents because they spoke Yiddish. And I had a professor, Harold Werner, W-E-R-N-E-R. And we sang this song in German. Aren't you glad you're not a duck? Yes, I'm glad I'm not a duck. Aren't you glad you're not a horse? Yes, I'm glad. And then one of the things was, aren't you glad you're not a Jew? And being the quiet, shy person man as I am now, I stood up and I said, do you realize what you just said? And he says to me, and this is the important language that's still today, you have to remember the context of the times. And being the person that said, yeah, I know the context of the time. It's called killing people because of their religion. He continued to press the idea that, oh, well, you know, and we're hearing this again now, oh, well, you know, you really have to understand what was going on at the time. We can't let that happen, lest we forget. Thank you all for coming. Food.
See you tomorrow. Yeah, got this. I think Jonathan said Freya is fine.